In a dimly lit laboratory, Jennifer Martin rubbed her tired eyes while staring at her computer screen. It was 7 a.m. after her night shift. As she immersed herself in reviewing the final data for a new pediatric cancer drug, her hand unconsciously reached for the pocket of her lab coat. From it, she pulled out a slightly worn photograph, an 8-year-old boy in a baseball uniform, beaming with joy. A smile involuntarily crossed her face. Lucas. As a senior researcher at Massachusetts General Hospital's Research Institute, Jennifer had dedicated her life to developing new treatments for children battling cancer. From the laboratory window, she could see the brick buildings of Harvard Medical School. The red brick walls, illuminated by the morning sun, seemed more vibrant than usual. On her desk lay stacks of experimental data untouched since last night. Next to them stood a vase of flowers that she changed every morning. Today, a single white flower bloomed quietly. "Jenny, good work." Dr. Sarah Cohen, who had arrived early in the morning, offered her a warm cup of coffee. She was Jennifer's only true friend at the institute. "Thank you, Sarah. Last night's data looks quite promising." "Yes, the new drug for pediatric acute lymphoblastic leukemia has finally reached its final stage." Her passion for research had become her life itself. However, the child who had been the source of that passion was no longer in this world. Every morning, when the shadow of the Prudential Tower fell across the institute, she had a habit of looking at her son's photograph. It had become like a ritual to start each new day. "Dr. Martin, could I get the materials for this morning's meeting?" At a young researcher's voice, Jennifer hurriedly tucked away the photo and composed her expression. "Yes, of course. I just finished the final data review." As she handed over the meticulously organized materials, she consciously maintained a bright demeanor. In the break room, colleagues were excitedly discussing their weekend family plans. When someone mentioned, "My child just started playing baseball too," her hands trembled slightly. She had developed a habit of discreetly excusing herself whenever such conversations arose. Outside the window, children were playing in the park, drawn out by the spring weather. The fresh greenery of Boston Common was shrouded in morning mist. Consciously avoiding that sight, Jennifer took a sip of her now lukewarm coffee. 3 years ago. That peaceful May morning had started like any other ordinary day. In the quiet residential area of Maple Street, the wind chimes swayed in the cool breeze from the Charles River, in a yard enclosed by white picket fences. "Mom, watch this." At the breakfast table, Lucas was enthusiastically reenacting his first hit from yesterday's baseball game. On the table sat Jennifer's favorite cereal bowl from the Boston kitchenware store. Lucas's bowl had blueberries arranged in his usual star pattern. "That's wonderful. We'll come watch your game this weekend. I'm looking forward to the Little League game. Is Dad coming too? Will he take videos like last time?" "Yes, he promised, didn't he?" Michael, reading the financial paper across the table, only managed a vague smile. His business trips had been increasing lately. Jennifer had unquestioningly accepted his explanation that he was busy with hospital management reforms. That morning, no one knew it would be their last family breakfast. While clearing the dishes, Jennifer slipped her usual message card into Lucas's lunchbox. "Have a wonderful day." In the early afternoon, Jennifer's cell phone rang, breaking the laboratory's silence with its sharp ring tone. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. "Mrs. Martin, your child has been in an accident. Please come to the hospital immediately." At the sudden call, the test tube slipped from her hands. Without even noticing the sound of breaking glass, she rushed out of the laboratory, practically throwing off her lab coat. When she arrived at the hospital, the emergency room was enveloped in a hectic atmosphere. The smell of disinfectant lingered in the hallway. Amidst the busy medical staff hurrying back and forth, Michael, who had already arrived, was calmly talking with the medical staff, befitting his role as the hospital's management planning director. There wasn't time to feel uneasy about his demeanor. "He's been taken to the operating room." At the nurse's words, Jennifer's world stopped. The waiting room. The couple sat quietly. No words were exchanged, only the merciless ticking of the clock continued. The painting on the wall showed a peaceful seaside scene. Its blueness now seemed strangely unsettling. Finally, in the deep of night, a tired-looking doctor informed them, "We did everything we could, but..." At that moment, color drained from Jennifer's life. However, she didn't yet know that this was just the beginning. The Boston night sky, where a drizzle had begun to fall, was engulfed in deep darkness, as if foreshadowing the long nightmare about to begin. The hospital corridor at midnight was coldly illuminated by fluorescent lights alone. The doctor's words, "The body was too severely damaged," echoed vaguely in Jennifer's ears. Michael stood beside her, but even his presence felt distant. "Please," just his face. To her pleading voice, the doctor shook his head apologetically. "I'm terribly sorry. Given the circumstances of the accident." The doctor's expression as he cut off his words held an uncomfortable shadow, but Jennifer was in no state to notice such subtle changes at the time. Just for a moment. Michael quietly exchanged glances with the doctor. The doctor heaved a deep sigh and gave instructions to the nurse. A small body covered by pure white sheets. Jennifer reached out with trembling hands, but... "That's enough." Michael gently but firmly held back her hand. That night remains only in fragmentary memories. Michael swiftly handled the cremation arrangements. "I don't want to cause you any more pain," he said, and Jennifer silently nodded. 3 years later. The lights in the laboratory at Massachusetts General Hospital's Research Institute stayed on late into the night. Jennifer deliberately chose night shifts. Only the time spent facing minute experimental data in the dark laboratory barely kept her sane. "Another all-nighter?" Dr. Sarah Cohen called out with concern. "Yes, I need to analyze the new trial data. But you're pushing yourself too hard. You need rest." "This is all I have." Lucas's room at home remained exactly as it had been on the day of the accident. The baseball glove, his beloved dinosaur encyclopedia, the Boston Red Sox poster on the wall. It was painful to watch dust gather on them, but she didn't have the courage to clean them up. Conversations between the couple dwindled day by day. The breakfast table on weekends now only had settings for two. Where once there was lively chatter, now only the sound of rustling newspaper could be heard. Michael's business trips to the hospital increased even more, and sometimes she found herself staring at an empty chair even on weekends. One evening during dinner. "Jenny, we need to talk." Michael, unusually at home, began in a calm voice. "I think we can't go on like this. A new life. You want a divorce." Jennifer responded with surprising calmness. She felt neither sadness nor anger anymore. The divorce proceedings progressed surprisingly smoothly. Michael paid generous alimony, and Jennifer kept the house. Everything proceeded as if predetermined. However, in daily life, small inconsistencies began to pile up gradually. One day, while organizing old documents, she found the hospital bill from the time of the accident. Reading through the emergency treatment details, something felt off about the procedures and timing. However, she dismissed it as possibly misremembering. When she found her son's old baseball team uniform, something felt strange. The coach had started to say something about the accident, it's really, before abruptly changing the subject. The parents of his teammates would awkwardly avert their eyes when they saw her. The school procedures had been oddly simplified too. Some documents that should have been necessary were said to be optional, and the administrative staff had seemed unusually nervous. When she tried to look up traffic accident records in Boston, there were puzzling responses. The records were said to be disposed of after the retention period, but 3 years seemed shorter than the usual retention period. Michael's behavior, in retrospect, had been unnatural. His calmness immediately after the accident. His rush to cremation. And how he skillfully avoided discussing the details of the accident. As a researcher, Jennifer was accustomed to not missing data inconsistencies or unnatural elements. However, at the time, deep grief had prevented her from focusing on these discrepancies. Walking home after her night shift along the Charles River, she could see a little league game in the distance. The energetic voices of young players carried on the wind. As she paused, she thought she saw a familiar back beyond the field. But she didn't chase after that back. She wasn't ready yet to accept the truth. Late at night in the laboratory, Jennifer was again facing experimental data. Her lab coat pocket still held her son's photograph as always. As she peered into the microscope, her cell phone rang. A call from an unknown number. "Mrs. Martin, your child has been brought to the hospital." At that moment, the test tube dropped from her hand. Glass fragments scattered across the floor, where the smell of disinfectant lingered. There must be some mistake. "My son 3 years ago." But her words were cut short. The words from the other end of the line would once again dramatically shake her world. "We identified him from his belongings, his name was on a baseball glove." The cell phone fell to the floor, its screen cracking from the impact. But Jennifer could still hear the voice leaking from the phone. "Mrs. Martin. Mrs. Martin." She picked up the phone with trembling hands. The glass fragments scattered on the white laboratory floor created eerie patterns as they reflected the fluorescent light. "Please, tell me where." Her voice was hoarse. Her throat was dry. "Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center Emergency Department. Please come as soon as possible." Before hanging up, Jennifer was already running. Throwing off her lab coat, she raced through the late-night institute. Her footsteps echoed in the dark hallway. With no time to wait for the elevator, she rushed down the emergency stairs. Bursting out the institute's back door, the early summer night air struck her cheeks. Her hand trembled as she hailed a taxi. "To Beth Israel Hospital, please hurry." The Boston nightscape flowing past the car window seemed distorted like a nightmare. The Prudential Tower's lights floated in the dark sky. The surface of the Charles River shimmered silver in the moonlight. Lucas, could it be? That day 3 years ago flashed back like a flashback. "We did everything we could, but the body was too severely damaged. I don't want to cause you any more pain." Michael's words, the doctor's expression, the nurse's behavior. All memories came rushing back with new meaning. Inconsistencies she hadn't noticed before suddenly became clear. When the taxi arrived at the hospital, it was already past 2 a.m. The emergency entrance's automatic doors opened. The smell of disinfectant once again stung her nose. "Mrs. Martin. This way, please." A young nurse guided her. Her steps were heavy. Her heart was pounding rapidly. A police officer was waiting in front of the emergency treatment room. "Mrs. Martin, let me explain the situation." A middle-aged detective began speaking in a quiet voice. "The boy was in a traffic accident on Beacon Street in Brookline. He's conscious but suspected of having a mild concussion." Jennifer could only hear the sound of her own heartbeat. The detective's words reached her like distant echoes. "We identified him from his belongings. There was a baseball glove with the name Lucas Martin written on it." She stopped in front of the treatment room curtain. Her hands were shaking. Cold sweat ran down her back. Taking a deep breath, she slowly opened the curtain. There, lying on the bed, was a boy. Perhaps 11 years old now. He had grown taller. The contours of his face had changed slightly. But it was unmistakably her son. "Lucas." The boy's eyes slowly opened. The color of his eyes was the same gentle brown as 3 years ago. "Mom." With that one word, all emotions flooded out. Tears streamed down her cheeks. As her body nearly collapsed, the detective supported her. Are you really alive?" Her son had a bandage wrapped around his forehead and an four in his arm. Yet he was undeniably there. Breathing. Alive. I've been looking for you." Lucas's voice trembled. I found the hospital where you work from a photo." The story gradually became clear. At a private hospital in Portland, Maine, Lucas had been held captive for 3 years under the pretext of memory disorder treatment. His education was minimal homeschooling. Contact with the outside world was strictly limited. But when I was watching a Red Sox game on TV, when Fenway Park appeared, your memories came back. Yes, little by little. Then I found a medical journal with your photo. With strength unexpected for an 11-year-old boy, Lucas had planned his escape. The blind spots in the hospital's security system. Staff shift changes. He observed everything, took notes, and waited for his chance. I finally managed to escape this morning. I took a bus, but when I tried to cross the street in Boston. His voice trailed off. The impact of the accident seemed to run through his body again. In the hallway, detectives were talking in hushed voices. Words like, "suspect Michael Martin's whereabouts," could be heard. The truth was more complex than imagined. Michael had been having an affair with a woman he met at the hospital. To start a new life with her, he planned to eliminate his son's existence. Using his position at the hospital, he executed a kidnapping disguised as an accidental death. He bought off collaborators, falsified records, and carried out perfect cover-up operations. "Ma'am, could you please review these documents?" The stack of papers the detective handed over contained numerous shocking pieces of evidence. A forged death certificate. Falsified accident reports. A list of medical staff involved in the cover-up. Email records between Michael and his mistress. Suspicious bank transfer histories. Everything had been planned. However, there was one element this perfect plan hadn't accounted for. That was the strong will of an 11-year-old boy to find his mother. Dawn was approaching. Through the hospital room window, a faint sunrise could be seen. Beyond the Charles River, a new day was about to begin. Jennifer held her son's hand tightly. Feeling his small warmth, she made a vow. Never again would she let go of this hand. "Mom, you must be tired." Lucas looked up at his mother with concern. "I'm fine. There's nothing to fear anymore." In the hallway, police activity was becoming more hectic. But now, such things seemed trivial. While watching her son's sleeping face, Jennifer thought about the new days ahead. About the time regained. And about moving forward in life, even while carrying wounds that would never fully heal. The morning at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center began quietly. With the sunrise, details of the incident gradually came to light. Suspect Michael Martin has been apprehended in Portland, Maine. Arrest warrants have also been issued for the accomplices. Conversations between police officers in the hallway leaked into the hospital room. Outside the window, reporters were beginning to gather. The headline, "Prominent Hospital Executive's Kidnapping Case," was already running in breaking news. Jennifer remained motionless, holding the hand of the sleeping Lucas. With dawn, reality was gradually sinking in. "Mrs. Martin." Detective Thomas O'Connor quietly knocked on the door. "We'd like to hear the details of your situation." Jennifer looked at her son's sleeping face and nodded slightly. Before leaving the room, she asked Nurse Jeanette to watch over him. The police interview room was temporarily borrowed from the hospital. On the wall hung a diagram of the case relationships. It showed the incredible truth in its entirety. Michael and Emergency Department Chief Sarah Williams had been involved for 5 years. To start a new life together, they planned to eliminate Lucas, their biggest obstacle. Using the hospital's systems and connections, they crafted a perfect kidnapping plan. These are the detailed records of the staged accident. Detective O'Connor spread out the documents. The accident scene photos, emergency transport records, everything was meticulously prepared. The body had been cleverly switched with that of a child who had died in another accident. Michael's position at the hospital and Sarah Williams' influence in her department silenced many witnesses. But why didn't anyone notice? Jennifer's voice trembled. According to testimonies, all involved staff were only given partial information. Only those two knew the complete picture. The interview lasted 3 hours. During this time, anger and sadness intermingled in Jennifer's heart. Betrayal from a loved one. 3 years stolen. And above all, the loneliness and fear her son must have endured. When she returned to the hospital room, Lucas was awake. Talking with the nurse by the window, he looked just like any ordinary boy. However, in the depths of his eyes quietly resided the weight of those 3 years. "Mom, I'm hungry." A smile unconsciously spread across her face. How precious such a simple, everyday phrase could feel. "What would you like to eat?" "A hamburger, and a Fenway hot dog." "Fenway?" "Yes. I want to go watch baseball again." At those words, tears welled up in Jennifer's eyes. Her heart swelled with emotion at her son's strength, how he was trying to look forward despite experiences that could have easily left him traumatized. A few days later, the hotel ballroom serving as the press conference venue was packed with reporters. After consulting with her lawyer, Jennifer had decided to speak in public just once. My son endured 3 years of loneliness and fear, and found his way back to me on his own. The conference room fell dead silent. From now on, we ask for our right to live a peaceful life as mother and son. That night, walking through the hospital corridors, Jennifer was thinking about returning to the research institute, about her new life with her son, and about the numerous challenges they would have to face. "Hey, Mom," Lucas called out from his hospital bed. "You know, my dream for the future has changed." "Oh? You don't want to be a baseball player anymore?" "No. I want to be a researcher. Like you, Mom, someone who makes medicine to help people." At those words, Jennifer held her son tightly. 6 months later, 2 sets of footsteps echoed through the corridor of Massachusetts General Hospital Research Institute. "Is this where you work, Mom?" "Yes. Today you get a special tour." In the laboratory, colleagues in their usual white coats were busy working. Lucas peered with interest at the microscopes and experimental equipment. "What does this machine do?" "It's equipment for making new drugs that suppress cancer cell growth." "Amazing." On weekends, he returned to Little League games. His teammates warmly welcomed back their old friend. On the field, his old carefree smile was gradually returning. At twilight, in their apartment along the Charles River, mother and son were about to begin dinner. The table was set with Lucas's favorite lasagna. Outside the window, the lights of the Prudential Tower were beginning to glow softly. "Mom, you know." Setting down his fork, Lucas began speaking with a serious expression. "I really want to be a researcher. Someone who can help people." "I see." Jennifer felt proud while being surprised by the strength of her son's determination. "Then, let's work hard together." In the vase on the dining table was a single white flower. Its pure white petals shone like a symbol of new hope. Outside the window, a peaceful night was descending on the city of Boston. Tomorrow, a new day would begin. Another page would be added to the recovered daily life of mother and son. From the television came news about the trial of Michael and his accomplices. However, that already felt like a distant story. "Mom, can I go to the Research Institute tomorrow too?" "Yes, of course." Everything was moving toward a new beginning.